So we're now on the top of the left column on page Ches. Adomim Hamitami. We've been discussing Arias Dam during this part of her month and that part of the month, the first 7 days. Now we want to talk about the Dam itself. Isha nases nido zovel b'rias domim shedarshim chachamim shemiminyan domim hamitamim. So we're going to have a whole list of categories of domim, some of which are mitamim and others are not mitamim. Lo b'chol mashka yotziv in amokah. Not every liquid that comes out of her uterus is dam hamitamim. Lefisha darshu chachamim, this Gemara Niddah Yutes, min hakasuv, bein dom lidam. Which means that the chachamim, who will rule as to whether she's tummy or not, will have to differentiate between one dam and another. One dam is dam tar, and the other is dam tum. Now we start with Chamisha Domim Tmeim. We have here a machlokes between the Rabbanon and Beis Hillel in the Mishnah Daf Yutes. We're going to start with the Shita of the Chachamim. And according to Chachamim, there are two colors of dam which are Tmeim. One is Adon, and the other is Shachar. And the Chachamim derive both of these categories of dam, these colors of dam, as dam tameh, from the Torah. In this case, actually from Tanakh. Shenemar, Vayiru Moav mineged, es hamayim adumim kadam. And the Torah adds the word adumim and describes adumim kidam. That means Adam is Adom. Hare shestam dam Adom. Okay, fine. So you have a source for dam, which is a red color. But what about a black color? Hashachar tabigati lefisha hashachar Adom. Shehu ela shehu shalaka. Shalaka. Laka means it became like deteriorated with the passage of time. So instead of being bright red, it turns black. Is there anything here important in the footnote? Kuf Yud Zayin, Lashon Rashba, Tamu Chachomes Hashachar. Wow. That's a strange language in the Rashba. We're talking about Dorais. If we're talking about Adom Shalaka, this is not a rabbinic institution. Okay. You have to reinterpret the words of the Rashba. You can't take that literally. So now we're talking about 5 categories of dam. We have dam, which is shachar. And then we have Adom, but Adom itself breaks up into 4 categories of Adom. Lefisha nichpal b'Torah domeha. Now, what I don't understand is, why does the word domeha indicate the number 4? I guess you'd have to say that domeha means 2 times 2. The Haim. So what are these 4 categories of Adom? Adom, and then we have Kikeren Karkom, and then we have Kimeme Adoma and Kimozu. So we have black, and we have 4 categories of red. And I'm going to assume that each category of red is a little bit darker than the other category, but it's not black. Arba maros ha'adom. Okay, now we're trying to take apart these four categories of blood that's red. The first of which is called Adom. Adom is Kedam Hamaka. I guess if you cut yourself, the blood that comes out, that's called Adom. However, there are many different interpretations in the Gemara about Adom Kedama Mak. He gives you five. Again, we're talking about one of four categories of Adom, which is the first of which was called Adom. And we have five different interpretations of what Adom is. And we haven't even gotten to the other four. I mean, the other three, actually. So one interpretation is Kedam Shchitas Hashor Betchilas Shchitasa. You know that when blood comes out of the animal from the neck after Shchita, there's the first initial dam, and then there's a second dam and a third dam. We're talking about the red blood of the ox immediately, that spurts out immediately with the Shchita. And we have a second interpretation. Kedam Maka Shel Tzipor. So if a bird gets injured, that's already a different color of red. I'm not sure what he means here. Is it a tzipor chaya or a shchuta? Okay. Then he has Kidam Makoles Harosh. So it's a kind of a bug that somehow you find it in the head. What would we call it? Maybe maybe we'd call it lice. You know, if you've raised young girls, you know what I'm talking about. You know, if there's a plague of lice, it's like horrible. You know, it's like the world comes to an end. And they have different combs, you know, to get rid of these lice, and different shampoos and everything. It's bad news. Especially you're not allowed to send your daughter to Gan if she has lice. But I guess the lice, if you crush them, they have a different color of red. The fourth interpretation is Kindam Maka Bezeres Shel Bachur. I wish he would explain that more. But anyway, we're talking about a young man, and his finger was cut. And it's got to be a young man, Shalom Nasi, she was never married. So he was injured, and then it was restored to health, and then it opened up again. So it's a wound in his hand that opened up again. So the second round of dam. And finally, we have a fifth interpretation of Adom, Hidam Harishona Yotze Bakaza, that if you let blood, which was common practice in those days, the first spurt of blood is, I guess, a very red colored blood. Rishonim, he quotes the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva. Shlo nechleku pirushim elu begvan maris adom elakula mara echad hem. Okay, this is the exact opposite of what we were assuming along. We thought each one of these pirushim gives you a slightly different hue, a different color of dam, and it gets darker and darker or lighter and lighter. But the Rishonim reject that. They say that all of these maros of dam are the same. Mara echad lehem. That's a little disappointing because why did the Gemara offer 5 pirushim? Nine afkamina.
I can understanding that the colors and correct shades have been transmitted. This is a Masorah that's that passed down.
Right.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, it would have to have been something b'Masorah, but what I'm trying to figure out is that you're just defining the word Adom in 5 different ways. Why bother with it? If at the end of the day, the Rishonim are saying that Kula Mara Echadlim. But he does say the following. Look at the language here. I don't want to be medai too much into the sifta, but he says, Lo nechaku peruchim elu begivun maris Adom. Different shades, like you say, of blood. Lo nechlaku. Elakula mara echad lehem. They all have the same shade. Yes. It doesn't give me, a satisfying answer to the question why the Chachamim and the Gemara went into detail about 5 different interpretations of Adom. Unless, what one thought occurs to me, tell me if this is worth anything. The Potzek sees the dam, and he's trying to figure out if this is the dam that the Torah prohibited as dam hamatam. Give him a broad spectrum, or so I say amplify and increase the possibilities. He may have in his life an encounter with this kind of dam or with that kind of dam. Let's say, for example, he's a shochem, or his next door neighbor is a shochem, or he comes to be machshir the shchita. That's, he wears different hats. So he has to paskin on shchita, he has to paskin on maris, and so forth. So if he has an exposure to a shor shachru, then he knows to identify what he's looking at as the dam of shchitas hashor. Another person might have more exposure to tziporim. He works with birds, or he paskins on birds, and so forth and so on. But basically, we're expanding the various alternative possibilities of making a comparison and identifying. Yeah, this is the you of shchitas shor. This is the you of makolas al rosh. This is the you of a dam ayotzi hakaza. He's familiar with hakaza, whatever it is. Do you follow what I'm saying? He's trying to expand. The Gemara is trying to expand the possibilities of helping. The way we would do it, I think, in contemporary life is that we would have a chart of different colors of blood, and they're all on this chart. You give out a placard. It's like, I don't know if you ever had this with Leil Pesach. They give you a placard. They tell you, oh, this is the size of your matzah. So you'll know, what the share of matzah is, how much matzah you have to eat. So we can create a placard with different hues of blood, say this is tameh and this is not tameh. But in the old days, they didn't have such sophisticated methods of, printing and publishing placards with the various colors of dam. So they told the poskim, here, you have 5 choices. Use any of these 5 choices in order to get a picture in your mind so that you can identify this is dam hamatam. Does that sound right?
Right. I mean, it's like one from the animal world, one from the bird, one from the insect, one from a younger person, one from an adult.
Excellent. But I'm just saying that, different people, the posting has to have exposure, hopefully, to one of these 5. He might not have exposure to all of these 5. If he has exposure to all of these 5, then he's an expert, and it's very easy for him to identify this dam by comparison. It's a dam hamatam. But by broadening the scope, you give him more options. Okay, now the second category of Adom was called Keren Karkum. Hainu, Kimaris alei karkum. So karkum is a kind of a spice that grows. I forgot what it's called right now in English.
Turmeric.
What's it called?
Curcumin is like turmeric.
Oh, okay.
It's yellow.
Kufchav Hey. He says that the karkum, when in the footnote, he says when it first grows, before it, I guess, fully ripens, it has a certain color. And that color will manifest itself before you cut it off the ground. I guess very shortly after you harvest it, it gets brown or it turns its color. Wow, he tells even which part of your garden you'll find this karkum. That while it's growing, it has this reddish color. He says on the footnote, Sheroeh hakarkum sha'omed bezovis v'yesh lomara acher mishe'imroim also b'emtza hagan. So you really have to be, this option would really only apply to someone who has that experience on a regular basis with a gan, with a garden, and they grow karkum in the garden, and there's one color of red that's in the, that's in the karkum in the middle of the gan, and the other one that's in the corners of the gan. What's that called in English? A person who's an this is not botany, is it? There's another word for that which grows, is there a word in English for that? Okay, Maris Kimeme Adoma. Ukimaris Hamayim Hatsofim Al Ha'adoma. This is very surprising to me. He says, B'gemor nechleku imhainu ba'adoma mibikas beis kerem. Sapphire?
Saffron.
Saffron. Okay. That helps me a lot. Does it help you?
It's got a red, the flower is like a reddish flower, and from that you get
a reddish flower.
I think it's got a reddish orangey.
Okay, so there's a place called Bikas Beis Keren. Like today, you have an area here called Beit HaKeren. I guess maybe that name was given from this Bikas Beis Keren. Oh, another possibility is Bikas Sachni. I think there's a place my kids took me on a tiyul once, which is called Sach, or something similar to Sach. Or we Bikas Ginotza, that's up in the north. Anyway, I guess that's where you'll find this, Kerem Karku. I'm sorry, Kimei Meme Adama. Maris Kimozug, right? Mozug was the last of the four categories. Is Kimaris Hayayin Hashroni. Yes, from the Sharon Valley. So Hamozug Bishnei Chalokim Kenegdo B'mayim. This is a very dark reddish wine that when we want to, the word I want to use to dilute it. Oh, that's the word. When you want to dilute the wine, the ratio is going to be 1/3 of natural concentrated wine and 2/3 water, until you finally get the wine that you can drink. Otherwise, it's too harsh to drink. But in its natural concentrated state, it has the redness of Kimaris Yayin Hashroni from Sharon, and that's a color of blood that is tummy. Now, what happens? You have this picture of blood that is Adom, and now you find a dam which exhibits a color of red that's different that deviates from the reddish four categories. For example, it's adumim yos or adumim pachos. It's either a more intense redness or a less intense redness. Nechlu fu gemara. Das ula shebekula mim haya mara shehu adom yoser min amaras atmeis tamei mim haya adom pachos min amaras tar. So if it's more deep red, it's more profoundly red, it's darker red, then it's certainly tummy with it like a kalachom. But if on the other hand, it's more of a diluted kind of color of red, it's less red than these four categories, then it's tar. That's ulashita. Now we get to Rav Ami bar Abba.
We're going to talk about the black blood at all. We're going to talk about the color of the black.
If I understand your question, you tell me if this is what you're asking, David. Why are you telling me that if it's darker, it's tamei b'toras adom? Why not call it shachar? Is that what you're asking?
No, I was wondering whether there was different types of black. Oh, there's red, there's different types.
I know we didn't get to black yet. Look at the next page. You have page test?
Yeah.
So take a look. The entire page test is about shachar, or at least half of the page.
Okay.
But I think what we should be sensitive to is that if Ula is saying that if it's redder than red, it's tamei, maybe we should call it shachar at some point. I guess it's still red, it's not black. So this is Ula. And now we get to Rabbi Ami bar Abba. Oh, I guess in Rabbi Ami bar Abba we have two lishonos, a lishna kama and a lishna basra. So now we'll study the lishna kama of Rabbi Ami bar Abba. Kulam beinim hayamara adom yoser o shoya adom pachos v'ma'at min amaras atmeos tamei chutz mimara shahayad mimuso pchusa harbe. Right, you want to underline the word harbe and the word ma'at in the previous sentence. Min amaras atmeos. Again, for this you would have to have some sort of rebbe with a transmission to tell me what's considered ma'at and what's considered harbe. So this Rebbe Ami, is lechumra if you compare it to Ula. Lechumra meaning it's more. You're expanding the possibility of tamei, because Ula said that if it's pachos, then it's maratar, and Rabbi Ami said that even if it's pachos, if it's only pachos ma'at, it remains maros tmeos. So the case of pachos ma'at could probably be identified as the nafkamina between Ula and the lishna kama of Rabbi Ami. Now we get to the lishna basra of Rabbi Ami. Das Rabbi Ami bar Abba b'loshen hasheni sheb'gemara sheb'kulon bein im haya adom yoser o adom pachos tahor. Any deviation from the categories of adom, the four categories that we have, if the color deviates from that color, whether it's more adom or less adom, it's not adom, it's tar. So that Rabbi Ami bar Abba in the Lishna Basra, instead of being a machmir, he's the greatest maker. He's all in favor of being matayr the dam if it's not exactly adom like those four categories. Even if it's more adom, that proves that it's not the adom of matame. So if we would take these three shitos and put them on a chart, going from kula to chumra, meaning from tar to tamei, then the lishna basra of Rabbi Ami would be the most tar. Any deviation whatsoever, either up or down from the adom of those four categories, is tar. On the other extreme, we're going to have a possibility that even if it's pachos, it's more diluted of an adom than the original adom, it still remains tamei. And that's Rabbi Ami in the Lishna Kama. So that if it's pachos ma'at, then it's tar. I'm sorry. If it's pachos ma'at, then it's tummy. If it's pachos harbe, then it's tummy. And in the middle between these two shitos, these two extremes, we have ula. And ula is going to say, if it's more tummy, I'm going to be mach. If it's more adom, I'm going to be mach. If it's less adom, apparently even if it's ma'at, it's tum.
Isn't it back up a moment? What being distinguished here is between menstrual blood and blood, a normal. Is that correct? Or
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that we're dealing with gzeres hakos. We're not. This is not biological. Meaning, we're not saying that because it's a little bit less red or a little bit more red, it is tummy. It's not tummy. I don't think so. We're not saying that. Well, it came from a different source. There are cases in Hilchas Niddah where we'll come to the conclusion that it came from somewhere else, even if it looks identical to dam. Like, for example, if she has an inner makkah.
that's right.
But what we're talking about here is where there's no reason whatsoever to assume that it came from anywhere else other than the makkah. This is real dam in a makkah, and we have no reason to suspect it's not. But the Torah says that certain dam is tummy and certain dam is not tummy. So these distinctions are not biological in terms of where did the dam come from.
So we're saying, we're understanding here. It's all menstrual blood, but some.
The Torah was
Actually,
metabe.
menstrual blood is tummy, and some menstrual.
Torah said that this is dam hamatami and this is not dam. What's the difference between the two? There's only a difference in terms of what the Torah identified as dam. We're not saying that because it's not identical with the dam, therefore we come to the conclusion it came from somewhere else. Again, there will be cases in which we have real dam, and yet we're going to say it came from somewhere else. And therefore she's not tummy. Okay, now we get to the fourth sheet. Das bar kapora, kidas ula. And if it's adam yoser, it's tummy. If it's adam pachos, it's tar. Chutz mi mare kiv mozuk shel das bar kapora gam im hoya mara adam yoser mimenu tar. What is bar kapora holding? Even though it's Tameh Yoser, which we said is Tameh according to Ula, and certainly according to one Lishna in Rabbi Yami, it's only the first Lishna the second Lishna who said that if it's Adam Yoser, it's Tar. Well, holding if it's Adam Yoser, Ula is correct. It's certainly Tameh. But the exception to that rule, and that's where Bar Kapara steps up to the plate, is the case of Kimazug. If you identify this color as Mare Mazug, then you've got to testify that this is exactly Mazug. If it's Yoser Adom, then it's Tar, only with regard to Mazug. Now, I don't understand how to reconcile this with the Rishonim that we mentioned before in Kuf Chav Ches, I think it was. No, where was it? Where was it that we said Kulam Shavim? Was that in the text or in the footnote? It was in the text? Oh, yeah. He says Kosvu Rishonim, so he tells you in the footnote where you'll find it in the Rishonim, Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva, that's where I got confused. This is a Pella, because Bar Kapara is telling you that Kimazu, which was, what number was that on? Number 5? No, that was Akaza. Oh, those are actually five different interpretations of Adam. Okay, so what I just said is wrong, absolutely wrong. But maybe we can learn something from my mistake. Can I tell you what mistake I made? Because I think we can learn something, from my mistake. I thought that last line in the paragraph that starts Arba'a, Shelo nechleku pirushim elu, begivud maras ha'edom, I thought that was relevant to this statement of Bar Kapara at the bottom of this column regarding Mazu, but I made a big mistake. Why? Because although the 5 interpretations of Adam are all the same, just as we tried to explain a different experience, everyone has different background in order to identify Adam. However, with regard to the other 3 maros Adam, those are different yous. And I don't know if you realize that, because I didn't realize that, or at least I didn't pay attention to it. So, for example, on the list of the other 3, the balance of the 4, we have Kimmazu. Kimmazu is a different you than any of the 5 interpretations of Adam, which are all identical, according to the Rashba section. Now, Bar Kapara has a unique shita with regard to Mazug. And he's going to tell you that Mazug has to be pulled exactly that color of Mazug. If it's a little bit more intense, it's a darker red, then it's tar. Although he accepts the shita of Ula with regard to all the other categories of Adom, that if it's more Adom, then for sure it's Tameh. But the exception to that rule is Kimmazug. And in the case of Kimmazug, it's got to be exactly Kimmazug. It can't be a little bit less, it can't be a little bit more. Don, are you able to follow us? I mean, you came in a little bit later. We're talking today about different use of dam. And the Torah says, Bein dam lidam. Not every dam is tameh. And it all depends on the color. Again, you and I we're not the experts on the color. You have to have, as Ruben pointed out, maybe a tradition, in terms of how to identify. But the sugya in Niddah Daf Yutes is giving us a method of comparison so that we can compare the dam that we're looking at to classic, categories. We call them archetypes of dam that are adom. With regard to dam tameh, and then based on those absolute standards, which we encounter in, as Steve said, in the 5 different areas of human experience and animals and so forth and so on, to compare it. And if we identify this dam that we're seeing as equal to one of those categories, and there are 5 categories, 4 of which are Adom and 1 is Shachar. We're studying Adom today. That's our topic, our thesis, our theme for today. Then we know it's Tameh. Then we have a machlokas. What if it's a little bit more intense of the color of Adom? What if it's a little bit less intense? So we're going to have all sorts of possibilities, variations of shitos. One shita is going to say it's got to be exactly like those categories, 4 categories of Adom. And the other sheet is going to say, wait, it depends. If it's more intense, then it's certainly Tameh. If it's a little bit lighter of a color of Adom, then it's tar. And then we're going to have a possibility of saying that in regard to one of these particular hues, which is called Kimmazug, it's got to be exact. That if it's more or less, then it's tar. Okay, so that leads us up to Yesh Min HaRishonim, which is mamish on the bottom of page ches. All right, then? So that's where we'll put away the Niddah and take out the Yavamos. I'm going to see if this Zoom is going to cooperate with me.